Hi, I'm Tom Lippincott, and this short video is for the purpose of explaining a little bit about this unusual instrument that I play. I get a lot of questions about it, and in particular, people that are viewing the demos for the Mike's Masterclasses videos that I do sometimes ask questions like, well, how am I going to be able to follow what he's doing in the classes if he's playing this weird guitar? Well, the answer is it's actually very simple. This is very similar to a regular guitar. You can see that I have 8 strings, 8 tuning pegs, but 6 of my strings, the inside 6, are exactly the same notes, exactly the same string names as a regular 6-string guitar. So I have an E, A, D, G, B, E, just like a 6-string guitar. The only thing different about this instrument is I've got an extra string on either end. I've got a low B string down here, a perfect fourth below the low E string of a regular guitar, and I have a high A, a perfect fourth, like the 5th fret of the high E string. Right? So that's the only difference. All of my shapes, chords, scale fingerings, anything that I would play would be exactly the same as a 6-string guitar. Here's a C chord, looks just the same except that I have 2 extra strings. A G chord looks just the same. Again, this is my low E string, not the one on the edge, but the one over from the edge. But everything in the middle, just like a regular guitar. The second question that I usually get is about the angled frets. People say, why are your frets crooked? Well, that's actually a fairly simple proposition. This is a thing called the fan fret system. If you look, you see the 12th fret is actually perpendicular to the neck itself, just like it would be in a regular guitar. And what happens is the frets fan out at slight angles in either direction, and by the time we get to the nut and to the bridge, they're at a fairly big angle this way and then this way. And what that simply does is it enables me to have different lengths of the different strings. Because I've got this extended range instrument, I've got the high A string in particular, it's really difficult, if any of you have tried this, to tune a regular guitar up, or to tune a string on a regular guitar up to a high A. Even if it's a real skinny string, you take a Strat and try to tune a string up to an A, it's probably going to pop, because that string is just under way too much tension for that length between the nut and the bridge. So the fan fret system allows me to actually have the length between the nut and the bridge for the high A string to be a little shorter than a regular guitar would be, without having to have the entire guitar be short, because that would also cause problems with the lower strings. On the other hand, my lower strings are a longer scale length, and that usually works better. That's why basses tend to be longer scale length than guitars. So that's really the only reason for the fan frets, and it does, like maybe if I play an F bar chord down here at the bottom of the neck, it's a little bit of an awkward angle, but I can't really think of any other chords that I play that, or any single note things that I play besides that are kind of awkward because of the fan frets. Once I get to about the 3rd or 4th fret, everything feels just about the same. And in a lot of ways, the fan frets or angled frets kind of conform to the shape of my hand a little bit better than regular frets do. So, and it's not a big deal. And incidentally, it doesn't affect the intonation of the guitar, doesn't affect the tuning of the guitar. The 1st fret is still the 1st fret all the way across. And it's not like, I get a whole step from the open string to the 1st fret down here because it's a little different or whatever. No, it works exactly the same as a regular guitar. I also get a few questions just about the guitar in general, and I thought I'd address a few of those. I had the guitar built in around 2001 by Bill Conklin of Conklin Guitars, and I can definitely give my enthusiastic endorsement to Bill Conklin. He did a great job with this guitar. It's been my main guitar ever since then. I've been really happy with it, and actually I was really happy in my dealings with Bill. He was extremely enthusiastic about my project from the very beginning. One of the few guitar builders that actually expressed any enthusiasm when I asked about building an unusual instrument. A lot of builders would just kind of laugh at me and say, yeah, right, like I want to go to all that trouble when I've got, 50 orders for guitars that I've already got all the stuff set up for. So I was really happy to make the acquaintance of Bill Conklin, and I highly recommend, his guitars. and his shop in general. It's a great business, and they make great instruments. I get questions about the string gauges that I use and the strings I use. These are all round wound strings. No, I don't buy a set of 8-string guitar strings because they don't make a set that works for this particular tuning that I use with the high A and the low B. So what I do is I just buy individual strings, and I have my high A is a 9, like a set of, like the high E of a light gauge set of strings. My E string is a 13, which is a fairly heavy string gauge, which I feel like it gives me a little fatter tone than maybe a more typical like an 11 or 10 or whatever. Plus, also keep in mind that my scale length on my high E string is actually a little shorter than a regular guitar, so the tension on my 13 high E is probably about the same tension, maybe like on a 12 on a regular guitar. I have a 16 on the B string, a 20 plain string for the G string. I tried a wrapped G string and I didn't like it. I think the plain unwound G just speaks better. And I like to be able to bend it, you know, for some styles that I might be playing on this guitar, even though I mostly play jazz with this instrument. My D string is a 32, the A string a 38, the low E string is a 50, and then my low B string, when I first got this guitar, I basically just found the heaviest guitar string I could find, which at the time was a 68, and it never quite sounded right. It was a little too floppy. And especially at one point, the company that I got them from started going from having a small core with 2 sets of windings to a big core with 1 winding, and that string just sounded terrible. So out of desperation, I actually tried a bass string, and it just so happened that the one that I tried, which was just like a discarded bass string that I found, was perfect. So a friend of mine helped me get some calipers and measure the string, and it turned out to be an 80. And I found out later that that's kind of a typical, like a low A bass string and maybe a set of light gauge bass strings. So that's the string that I use now on the low B. A couple of sort of allowances I had to make. I had to have somebody route out the nut slot a little bit wider than normal to accommodate the wider string. And also when I put the string on, there are 2 sets of windings. I have to kind of peel one of the sets of windings off for it to fit through the tuning peg. And at the other end, as some of you may know, bass strings have a bigger ball end on the end, and that actually doesn't fit through the ferrules here on the back of the guitar. So you may be able to see, I'm not sure, in the video, that you can see that big ball of the bass string kind of sticking out there. And it works just fine. I mean, it does stick out, but it doesn't bother me in the back there, and it stays in tune just fine. So it's worked out perfectly for me. And so that's it with the strings and the gauges. The wood of the guitar, the neck is actually a laminate between maple and purple heart. You can see on the back here, the purple heart are the kind of maroon looking stripes, and that's a real strong wood. Bill Conklin said that he calls it nature's graphite, and it helps keep the neck rigid with the extra tension from the extra strings. I've got a rosewood fingerboard, stainless steel frets, which have lasted the whole life of the guitar since 2001. They're still going strong. I've got a swamp ash body with hollow chambers. So it's got a little bit of the qualities of maybe a semi-hollow body guitar, but not quite, you know, maybe kind of a hybrid between something like a Telecaster, like solid body guitar, maybe an ES335, which is kind of what I was looking for, kind of halfway in the middle between those 2 sounds. The pickups are both humbuckers made by Seymour Duncan. I don't know much about them, but Bill Conklin said that they were made custom for him, for his 8 strings. And I've also got RMC piezo saddles, which can be used to get a sound kind of like an acoustic guitar. I usually mix that in with the electric, particularly when I'm doing solo gigs or a duo gig with a singer or something like that, where I want to get a little more percussive of a sound because there's no drums providing, you know, percussive sound. And it, you know, it doesn't sound just like an acoustic guitar, but it definitely gets a more acoustic-like sound The RMC saddles were also designed actually to work with a guitar synthesizer, which a long time ago I was really into, and took great pains to make sure this guitar would have guitar synth access. But shortly after I got this guitar, I kind of got burnt out on using guitar synths anyway, so I pretty much never use it. Next would be the controls for the pickups. The 4 knobs. I've got a master volume, master tone, a blend knob for the piezo and middle pickups. All the way one way is just the magnetic, all the way the other is just the piezo pickup, and then there's a center detent in the middle for a 50-50 blend. I usually keep it all the way over on the magnetic side. Then the last knob is the volume for the synth, which I never really use. And then I've got these 3 three-way switches. The first one here is just a standard pickup selector switch. Up is just the neck pickup. Middle position is both neck and bridge. And of course just the bridge pickup. Usually just use the neck pickup. The other 2 three-way switches are just for the synth. This is just a selector switch between guitar, synth and guitar together, and just synth. Of course I usually just keep it on guitar. And then I've got a momentary switch down here which controls some of the various functions for the Roland style guitar systems, like the 2 buttons on a GK pickup. It controls things like turning the tuner on and off, and I think entering into bank mode and so forth. Then finally, I've got Spurzl locking tuners, which help the guitar stay in tune, a graphite nut, which also helps the guitar stay in tune. And that's pretty much the whole instrument. I didn't mention this before, but it does have a bolt-on neck, but it is, as you can see, a very smooth transition between the body and the neck, so it almost feels like a glued-in neck, even though it is bolt-on. So that's the guitar, and I hope that I've answered most people's questions. If there's any question that I didn't answer in this video, feel free to send me an email to ask me further questions, and thanks a lot.